Hi. Before we get started, I just want to mention that we recorded this episode back in January of 2025, and it is now May as I put the finishing edits to the episode. So if there are parts of the episode that seem rather anachronistic, now you know why. So thanks for your patience, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, I'm Tommy.
And I'm Dante.
You're listening to Twigging Onto Twig, a podcast where we talk about Wildbow's most implacable web serial, Twig.
In today's episode, we are talking about Stitch in Time 4.9 and 4.10. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, you do it.
All right. And here's the audiobook descriptions. 4.9. In this chapter, Mary gives Cy a very particular look. Several times. I'm not sure whether he'll survive this one. 4.10. There's an awful lot of tension and frustration in this chapter, but bear with us. By the time you get to the end, the Lambs will be moving forward again towards whatever victory they can squeeze out of this situation. Cy is getting closer to his solution. Our little heroes' trust in one another is becoming strained. Let's jump in together and listen to the beginning of the end of Stitch in Time.
Is that a reference to something?
What, the whole thing?
Yeah, that feels like a reference to... It's structured differently from
It is
almost
structured
all the...
differently. I am not wording well tonight. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Hopefully it's entertaining rather than annoying.
The worst.
The worst. Yeah, I did notice that it was different than previous, and I kind of just thought she's trying something new with her
Maybe
descriptions, but...
Let's jump in together and listen to the beginning of the end of... I'm going to Google that real quick.
Okay. While you're doing that, I'm just going to comment that the beginning of the end of this arc is an interesting and good way of putting it, because it hadn't really occurred to me that that's where we're at in this story, because it's kind of... It's been a long arc. But it kind of is. Like, this is...
the climax, or at least we're building towards the climax.
This could very well be the climax, yes.
Yeah. I
think there's 5 chapters left in
that much
this arc.
Wow, that's not nothing.
Oh no, there's only 3 left. There's 2 more chapters proper, and then 1 interlude.
In which case, yeah, then definitely the end of the arc.
Arc 5 is even longer.
We'll get through it in a year. All right, so Happy New Year, and welcome back to North America.
Happy New Year. It's 2025. It's been ages since our last episode.
Not that long.
It's been so long.
Was it November, December?
I think it was November. It was 2. When I was looking at discussion question responses, they were 2 months old.
Okay. Well then.
So it's been 2 months. Hopefully you haven't all forgotten about us.
Who are you? But you know what? That's why we do a previously on Twig section.
That's true. This is our plot recap, so that if you've forgotten what's going on,
here we are.
So,
previously on Twig, the Lambs attempted to infiltrate Dame Cecily's in order to get to see what Genevieve was up to. The plan is derailed when they are spotted by Wendy and several students. The students head down to Genevieve's lab to confront her, goaded and prodded, and with the Lambs in tow. When we last left them, Wendy tied to a banister, Lambs in the hallway, Cy and students confronting Genevieve. Genevieve knocks out the students and sets Warren on the Lambs.
In Stitch in Time 4.9, the Lambs run away from Warren. In the process, Mary is badly injured by being crushed against a wall. I think Warren threw a chair at her, which resulted in that injury.
Yep.
Gordon and Cy try to slow Warren down with Mary's knives, but it's not very effective. At the last moment, as they run away, Cy convinces Wendy to come with the Lambs in order to, quote, help Warren.
I enjoyed the fact that everybody was like, Cy, what are you doing? No, we don't have time for this. He's like, no, I got this. So, in Stitch in Time 4.10, the Lambs take stock and then split up. Mary goes to track Genevieve and Warren. Jamie and Lillian go to gather intel at Dame Cecily's. Gordon and Cy go to meet up with 2 academy dropouts in the wood, and Helen comes with them with Wendy. Once they get to the camp in the wood, the remaining lambs try to get any info they can from Wendy. Unfortunately, she knows very little. Gordon takes Cy aside and confronts him about the way he's dealing with Genevieve. Cy explains that Genevieve is like water, and then suddenly realizes that is the answer. Genevieve has put something in the water supply, and then they and the academy dropouts race to spread the warning. Again? Perfect. I'm pretty sure I pronounced Genevieve and Genevieve differently twice throughout that thing. At least.
I'm surprised it's that few times.
Yeah.
Like, Cy flip-flops between Genevieve and Frey. In my mind, I flip-flop between Genevieve and Genevieve.
Mm-hmm. Genevieve is just a nice name.
It is a nice name.
So yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about the overarching plot here?
Yeah. I didn't really have a lot to talk about. One of the big things that is worth discussing, like a lot of this, as usual, is character stuff. So just with regard to the plot, I think Mary's injury is more of a hindrance to like the plot than to Mary herself as a person.
Well, I think it's interesting because on some level it's going to force the lambs to operate as they did before Mary showed up, but also while still having to integrate Mary. Like, it's kind of a test of how integrated Mary really is in a way.
Mm-hmm. Like, I'm sure the lambs have dealt with a severe injury. I mean, Jamie was severely injured during the Sub Rosa plot.
Yeah.
And Cy was severely injured during one of the previous arcs, I think.
Well, he definitely got cat venom acid sprayed on him.
Yeah. Yeah, it was in the that introductory part, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It feels like it being Mary is a bit more important just because she is technically an outsider. I guess not really, since, or as much of an outsider as like Cy kind of is, considering he wasn't meant to be one of the lambs originally, right?
Yeah. Maybe just because this is the first time that she's been put in this position. Yeah, as far as we know. So like all the others, they've kind of been tested with their ability to work with each other despite injury, but now Mary's injured, and this is the first time she's been in that position with the lambs.
In theory, the first time that she is a burden to the others.
Yes.
Which I think
I feel like Mary is the most, of the lambs, Mary is the one who would most have difficulty with being the burden.
Yeah, for sure.
And she does more or less get patched up by the end of these 2 chapters.
Well, I mean, Lillian is a wizard.
Yes. But I think that, like, her injury, like, I feel like in the past when there's been an injury, like when Jamie was injured, like, they were just like, okay, well, we'll make sure that Jamie's okay, but we can kind of work around it, sort of. Whereas in this case, they're like, okay, well, Mary is hurt, and we're really struggling without her. Like, really struggling. Like, we can't stop him. We can't even hit him with the knives. We have to, like, carry her along and whatever. Like, you mentioned her being a burden, but, like...
she's physically a burden.
She is, physically, very literal burden, and much more so than Jamie was in Sub Rosa's chapter, or Cy was when he was injured. Which I thought was interesting, and it certainly builds the tension a lot with Warren coming at them.
Well, I also thought it was interesting how, I mean, Cy, when I say he, I mean Cy, because what other he's are there? Cy kind of explicitly brings up Sub Rosa, but it's interesting how much of a similarity there is. You know, they're running away desperately from this hulking monstrosity stalking them down a hallway.
That's true.
And I thought it was interesting that I don't know if there's a direct comparison to be made there, but it's definitely one I think Wildbow wanted us to have because he explicitly brought up, or had Cy bring up, Sub Rosa right around then.
I think I read it, like, very specifically about the two characters, like comparing Sub Rosa and Warren. But I didn't even think of comparing the situation that the lambs are in now with the situation the lambs were in when they were facing Sub Rosa.
Well, if I have to make a prediction based on this,
we're gonna dump Warren down a stairwell and...
No, I was going to say that this is setting us up mentally or emotionally for whatever's in the water to make the town hostile to them in the way that, like, the bowels were essentially this hostile environment. Just priming us, I guess. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but...
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe it's just...
I guess we'll see.
Maybe it's also just... It doesn't have to be anything as literal as the town is hostile, but rather just putting them in that same kind of off balance. They're being hunted. Sub Rosa knows more than she should, and they don't really have the hometown advantage that they had in the previous arcs. Because Frey is acting, very differently than Sub Rosa, obviously, but essentially keeping them off their toes.
Yes. On the subject of the water supply, that was going to be the next thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Because we did actually see, like, Sai remembers the serpent thing in the water when he realizes what she's done. And that serpent thing was, what he recalled was just sluggish and lethargic.
Which we assumed was cold.
Presumably you would think, well, that means that's what the water supply issue does.
Well, I assumed it was lethargic and sluggish because it is cold out and it is a snake reptile thing.
Well, that's what he assumed at first.
Yeah.
That's what he said when he saw it.
Was it? Okay.
When he saw it, he's like, oh, it's slow and sluggish because it's winter and it's a snake. Whereas in this chapter, when he remembers it, he's like, oh, it's slow and sick.
Because she's poisoned the water.
Because she's poisoned the water, is how I read it. And so I'm assuming that whatever she's done with the water supply makes you slow and sick.
Potentially.
Just kind of like, I don't know, zombifies you.
Or just slow. It's opposite Wyvern, it just makes you slower, dumber, but actually better at fighting.
Yes.
I think I wrote it down in our little Sai section, but I liked very much Sai with the knives attempting to bullshit his way into being good at throwing knives as he would like a social situation.
Yes. If only those knives were more easily manipulated.
Only they were bugs in a box.
Yes. Sorry, knives don't work that way.
But he absolutely is like, all right, just if I release it a little bit later, then this will happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. They said that if he had had more time, he would have gotten there.
Yeah. He wouldn't have retained it, but he would have gotten there eventually.
Which makes me wonder, is this how he always approaches learning a new skill? Is trying to...
just brute force it until it happens?
Is trying to master manipulate it into working, even though it's an inanimate object.
Maybe. Sai has one approach to problems, and sometimes it works.
And if it doesn't work, you just do it again and again and again until it does work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't made that thought, but I definitely can see that being the case.
I think it would be funny, and therefore it's officially headcanon.
Yep.
The only other thing that I wanted to mention was the sort of splitting up of priorities. And I put that down just because of the way these chapters end, where they have to choose between going after Genevieve or trying to save the town.
And we can do both.
Well, hopefully they can do both, but they did tell the dropout students, like, prioritize warning people over trying to catch Genevieve. But that's not the only time where there's a split up, because they literally did split up. Like, Mary's doing one thing, Jamie's doing another thing. They're all split. They're all going after the same problem, but they're completely split up. And presumably Mary and Jamie and Lillian don't even know about the water supply yet.
Well, so that's why they say they're like, oh, if you see Mary, the girl in pigtails, tell her about this. But I think it's it's important to talk about this a little bit because it's the first half of this arc, and even part of this chapter, is really focused on them not being in sync. And like when they are in sync, it's like it works really well and it's really cool, but they're struggling to find that rhythm. And here they've split up, I guess explicitly trusting that they have the rhythm and nobody's going to run into each other and cause problems.
But then there's this new information that explicitly desyncs them.
Yeah.
So that could cause a lot of problems, but I guess we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
For sure.
Aside from that, for like plot related stuff, I didn't make any particular notes. Like, it's pretty straightforward, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, they run, and then they run, and then they run.
Yep. I suppose we could talk about the interrogation of Wendy, but I think we're probably going to talk about that more in the character section anyway.
I think so, yeah.
So let's move on to our world building. In terms of just general world building things, the only thing I pulled out was a long coat of black lab grown wool.
Is that even, special at this point? Just assume.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like everything's lab grown.
Yep. Which, I mean, if we're going to reference our first intro episode, we were talking about, the cyberpunk or the punk concept in like fiction genre, the punk genre. I'll get this word out eventually. Talking about the punk genre in fiction.
You almost made it.
I almost did. The concept of just that everything is a product. Everything is, nothing is really natural. I guess I'm struggling to articulate this thought. But it just feels very in character for this kind of fiction to separate itself from the natural world as much as possible. In a way, it's everything is a product. Everything is commoditized in like classic cyberpunk or that kind of thing.
Yep.
Like, I'm sure it'd be cheaper and easier to have, classic mechanized loom weave, shear a sheep and then card the wool and then dye it black and weave it, then orchestrating something to grow it. I mean, presumably you're ending up doing all the same things, except you have to maintain a lab rather than having to maintain a sheep. I don't know.
Yep.
Because I'm assuming it's not extruding woven lab coats.
Well, see, I thought it was just growing the wool in a lab instead of on a sheep. And
exactly.
The rest of it
That's what I'm saying. Like at that point, why? Like, I doubt that there's an efficiency of cost or material or labor.
I would think that there would be a pretty significant savings because, like, raising animals is expensive.
You know what's happening here?
Room.
We're overthinking this. They're just raising sheeps in labs. It's like the cage grown chickens. They just have sheep in labs, in cages, and they're shearing them there rather than letting them roam.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yep.
But see, the point that you were making put my mind way on the other end, where they were like actually extruding coats.
Yeah. No, I'm assuming it's something like that. They've isolated the follicles of sheep, and they have some artificial.
This is what they've done. They're raising sheep in the lab, like caged chickens, but the sheep grow pre-made lab coats on their backs.
Makes sense.
That then get cut off and worn. That's how it works.
And that's why it's black. It comes from the black sheep.
Exactly. And then they get white ones from white sheep and gray ones from gray sheep and pink ones from pink sheep.
Correct.
In terms of locations, there was a very kind of poetic description of Kensford in the dark in this chapter that I wanted to pull out here.
Yeah.
With the sky getting dark, the odd and unusual trees of Kensford took on a more haunting appearance. jagged black lightning bolts with highlights of white here and there. The cottage-like dormitory houses were lighting up within. They were small enough that each little window of orange flame or flickering voltaic power had silhouettes moving within.
It's very Halloween-y imagery.
Yes.
And it plays well with some of the other imagery that we've seen in the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I have it written down under the Warren thing, but just the image of, let me read this here. His facial features were very normal, but he held his head at an angle that cast his eyes in shadow, the flickering light outlining his massive frame, which is, similarly very
It's a very
evocative.
Halloween movie.
Yeah, exactly. And even Genevieve's look with the femme fatale look, I mean, I guess both, I related both of those more to like a noir film.
Sure.
And I can also see that for the...
They're very cinematic.
Yeah, I think that's the best one. We've said that before about Twig, how
Well, Wild Bill
cinematic
is
it feels.
often very cinematic.
Yeah,
But yeah, definitely there's an aesthetic to it with these villains in this town.
definitely. And it's different, I think, from what we've seen before.
I kind of get the impression that Genevieve cares about the aesthetic.
I think so.
Like, she wants to have this showdown in this picturesque academic town
Mm-hmm.
in the snow against the trees. She's like, this is the appropriate place for this showdown to happen. Have we remarked before on the odd and unusual trees of Kensford?
I
don't
think we
remember them
have.
being unusual. I remember we've noticed that like things aren't made of trees the way they are in Radham.
Yeah, I think we have talked about that.
I wonder if that's what's unusual. They're like
kind of real.
actually normal looking.
Yeah, they don't have any kind of like... Well, I don't imagine that the Radham ones also have a lot of rigidity and structure and like uniformity. I still picture them kind of like growing haphazardly organically, but yeah, it feels more real here.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of like Jack Pine. Like if you've seen like the Group of 7 paintings of Jack Pines and how they're kind of like jaggedy, beautiful, wild trees.
I did not know these paintings, but they're really nice. Yeah, I get what you mean. Definitely recommend anybody listening look at those paintings if you don't know them. They're pretty nice.
Look up the Group of 7. They're very famous up here in Canada, and for good reason.
Yeah. Have you seen them? Are they like at the art gallery here, or?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them at the art gallery. My mom has a beautiful painting that
An original?
was. I don't think it's an original, but it was in our house growing up, and so yeah,
it's very local, I guess. Algonquin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd not seen these before, and they're really nice. Oh yeah, it says National Gallery of Canada has it.
Yeah. So specifically, the Jack Pine by Tom Thompson is the sort of look that I'm thinking of for these trees. But I mean, it could be meant to be something completely different. But that's sort of what's in my imagination.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like that visual, and I'm probably adopting it.
Anyway, very picturesque. I'm sure there are lots of. I'm sure if this world allowed for artists to prosper, there would be many of them in Kensford.
Yeah, it feels like the kind of place that should have a little like touristy main road that has like all these little like shops and that sells little souvenirs and like soaps and knickknacks and art from local artists, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it could totally be a little. Like it says cottage-like dormitory houses. Like this would be like a place where people would go to cottage.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah. Come on, Kensford. You're missing out on the tourism industry here.
Exactly. And they've got a whole college town thing there. Like that's they have to have that kind of thing. They have a captive audience, a captive population.
Yeah, they've got to do something. This is also a fancy college, so they're not going to have like pubs that are thriving on student nightlife.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
or maybe they will. I don't know.
It doesn't feel like the kind of place that has a thriving nightlife. I mean, if it did, the dropouts wouldn't be slumming it at a campfire in the woods. They'd be hanging out at a bar.
True. And they might even work at the bar. No,
Yeah.
it would be all Stitched working at the bars. I don't know.
No, but I get what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
it has the look. Well, this is very emblematic of the whole thing. It has the look of that kind of quaint, lovely cottage town, but it doesn't have the soul.
Yeah, I think that sums it up very well.
And I feel like that's true of so much of what we're seeing in this setting.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's very insightful. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Shall we talk monsters?
Yes.
Boys and girls of every age, wouldn't you like to see something strange?
Thank you, as per usual, to all of the respective associated thankies. Danny Elfman
and
Megafire.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The most important monster, at least in the beginning of this chapter, is Warren, but I think we'll talk about him later because...
And Wendy, too, yeah.
His monstrousness doesn't really come up much.
Well, I think
Wendy too, but
arguably Warren's
true.
humanity is much more important than his monstrousness in these.
Yeah. And Wendy too.
Yeah.
I don't know why I put that thing about Warren in the notes when it applies just as much to Wendy, if not more so. That they're both in this story and happen to be monsters, but the monstrousness of them isn't really what's important.
We may be falling into a trap, maybe, by having a separate monster corner and not just they're all characters that we need to talk about.
That's true.
I mean, I feel like...
I think when we started out, we were like looking at monsters like the rabbit fetus.
Exactly, yeah.
Character thing.
Or like a particular class of monsters, for example, like Stitched rules, not individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we should move back towards that.
Yeah, and we haven't really seen many of those.
No, giant.
Just the whelps recently.
Yeah,
and even them, they're kind of people-ish almost, or like
they're like
friendly animals,
friendly rats.
Well, they look like rats, but they're more like
friendly.
They're part of the gang.
Are they? Do they look like rats? I picture them like roly-poly woodlice.
Okay, I don't remember. I'm sure we took note of what their actually described appearance was, and then promptly forgot.
But yeah, woodlice.
Definitely. I think we can talk about Stitched in general because there was a couple of one little hint about Stitched in general. About Stitched hair didn't tend to grow, or it fell out faster than it grew in, which I thought was an interesting little detail. Makes sense.
It does.
But you don't think of that sort of thing if they're reanimated.
Well, it kind of made me think of it's pretty much the opposite direction, but it made me think of like that old myth or story that like fingernails and hair continue to grow after death.
Is that a myth? I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's like a thing, and it turns out people used to think that because bodies desiccate a little bit when they die, so like fingernails look like they stick out longer, and like
that does make sense.
Yeah,
I've never heard that myth, but that makes a lot of sense.
Which I think is why some of like the earlier vampire myths talk about like long nails and
claws.
Yeah. So
it doesn't help that claws are menacing anyway. So
true. You add that to it, but we should also talk about Wyvern. We learned some things about Wyvern here, or not learned really, but just
like a few more little allusions to its side effects.
Yeah.
There's this one quote, like Sai has a lot of thoughts in these chapters about Wendy and what has happened to her, like how being post-mortal, essentially, has affected her. And in one point, he compares her to himself. And he says it was poisons that eroded my faculties and death that had eroded hers, which I thought was a really fascinating comparison. And also kind of like Wyvern has similar effects on your faculties to literally dying. That's concerning.
Yeah, well, and it kind of made me think also about Genevieve Frey's talking about like the trade-offs. She says, I mean, I don't think she's lying. She says she gets attached too easily because Wyvern has like broken down some of the barriers in her mind.
Hmm.
And like there are all these trade-offs for so many of these ostensibly superpowers that are being given by Academy Science. I mean, we're talking about Wyvern
Mhm.
specifically, but there's other things like these are these advantages that you can take, but there's also like pretty significant burdens that come along with them.
Yep. Yep.
And like
Yep.
even we had I think hypothesized that some of the reasons Sai struggles with memory is not necessarily just because he's of the Wyvern thing, but because it was given to him too young or very young, and so his brain kept elasticity but didn't develop like the memories that we as adults potentially
Hmm.
have. But it seems
Yep.
like no, because Genevieve also talks about losing long-term recall.
I think it does. I think it would like um like build off each other,
Yeah.
because like, young children have notably high amounts of like neuroplasticity.
Yep.
I don't know if that's the technically correct way of wording it, but you know what I mean.
But young
Um,
children, from my experience, also have an insane memory. Like, my son, for example, will mention something that happened weeks and weeks ago, and it's like, wait, you like, we'll do something or say something, and then he'll bring it up so much later without us really having any it takes us a minute sometimes to be wait, oh, that's true, that did happen, that's something that we talked about like a month ago. And for a 2-year-old, a month is a significant portion of one's life.
Yep. Yep. That's impressive. So I just feel like the way your brain works when
Yeah.
you're really young,
Mm-hmm.
combined with the way Wyvern works on the brain, it's kind of like when waves interfere with each other. You get
Mm-hmm.
like the constructive interference of the plasticity, and then the canceling out of recall or what have you. It's just like just compounded the
Yeah.
the results of it,
Yeah.
because your brain is so much more
Well, 'cause it seems like
receptive at the time.
Sai struggles even with things like muscle memory, right? Because he like picks up a
Mm-hmm.
skill and then loses it again. So it's not just. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I was about to say something stupid along the lines of, "Oh, it's not just the brain; it's the muscles also." But I know that muscle memory is not actually your muscles.
Yep.
Regardless, sounds like it sucks to have a wyvern.
It really does. Like, I would not want to be in his shoes, that's for sure.
No, even I would not like to be in my shoes with wyvern.
Nope. Nope. I'll stick to my prescriptions, thanks very
Mm-hmm.
much.
Yep.
I didn't catch any historical references,
Did not either.
so let's move on to our character section, which we're kind of already talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we maybe structure this too much, and
Yeah, well, we've got to structure it somehow. We could
yeah.
do it like everyone else does and do it beat by beat, but
No, I feel like we end up bouncing back and forth
we do.
anyway.
It's very true. It's very true.
Yeah.
We did already mention, for example, the knife throwing, which was my
Yep.
first point under Sylvester.
Yep.
I did think that this quote was hilarious. Should have given the knives to Jamie, Mary said, a few feet behind me, speaking under her breath. At least he might have hit something. Resent that, I said, my voice tense. Ditto, Jamie said. I thought that was hilarious.
It is. Along with the
Um,
next bit that you posted or that you added.
Yeah, the next bit was more just like insightful. I would have hit him, I said, a little bitter that my moment of glory had been stolen. We don't have a week for you to learn, Sai, Gordon said.
Yeah.
That is funny, but I do think like the idea is
he would have
if
gotten
he
there.
had a week, he would have gotten there.
And probably even not a week, probably 5 minutes, like he said. Well, he was getting closer.
Maybe a few
and
hours.
closer.
I would guess a few hours would do it. A few hours would get him to the point where he could hit
Warren,
and a week would get him to a point where he could injure Warren.
Well, I mean, considering nobody injured Warren.
Well, that's because a week hadn't gone by yet.
True. I liked actually also the opening of the chapter 10.9 or 4.9. I threw myself back out of the doorway. Mary moved in the opposite direction, her shoulder bumping mine. She threw a knife, then twisted around, her still wet boots skidding on the floor. She grabbed the door in my offered hand to catch herself, then ran with the rest of us, her hand in mine. Like the actual text of that sounds a lot like two people bumping awkwardly around each other trying to get away. But
yes,
the way it also flows makes it sound so smooth, like this really dramatic, badass moment of them like catching each other and like propelling each other down the hallway and throwing knives backwards. But like, yeah, like I don't know which one is actually accurate there. It's just
I think it's both. I think that Mary's probably the sort of person who can
land on her feet,
fall on her face, and make it look intentional.
Yeah. But again, showing them working in sync relatively well. Like even while still getting into stepping on each other's toes.
Yes.
So there's one thing I also noticed between Sai and Genevieve. Actually, I feel like this is all kind of important. This these interactions with Sai and then Gordon and Genevieve, or like how Sai's interacting with Genevieve as viewed by Gordon in a way.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that, quote, the lambs, myself included, would put a human on the line of fire if we needed a hostage or if we needed to hurt someone to get a step closer in our goals. And I thought it was, first, before we get into the Genevieve thing, it's really interesting that in that line, he refers to humans as separate. You know, he is separating himself and the lambs from humanity.
Interesting.
Like, he's seeing himself as, I don't know, better or just distinct, but not part of the mass. And I don't think he often talks about himself that way or the lambs that way.
I think he does think of himself as
an experiment.
Well, he thinks of himself as an experiment, but he also thinks of like, those are the humans over there, and then this is us over here.
But I don't think
experiments.
I don't think he thinks of himself as a quote unquote monster. Like, because he also kind of distinguishes between the lambs and the experiments by talking about how Gordon is good at talking to experiments.
That's true. Or maybe it's just because they're kind of like an overlap group where it's like they're not human enough for the humans and not monster enough for the monsters, sort of thing. Which normally would be very isolating, but Sai doesn't seem to explore that side of it.
Yeah. Though also Gordon is the best at wrangling the lambs, which is because he's best at talking to experiments.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe he's just the best at wrangling everybody.
Yeah. Monsters and humans, not that much of a difference.
Nope. I think that there is a lot to say about, like you said, Sai and Genevieve and Gordon all together, but there's also like, Sai and Gordon have this relationship that we've kind of seen here and there, but it really gets outlined and like, I forgot to grab a quote for it.
Me too. But I know which one you're talking about. Just like, let me get back to it. Let me find it real quick.
It's the one that starts with, I like you, Sai.
That's what it is. Yeah. I like you. Well, okay. Helen and Lillian, they're not much of a match, you know? Lillian's a little scared to work on Helen, even after it blew up a few times. They don't play off each other well either. They handled the Sub Rosa thing pretty well. Pretty well, Gordon admitted. What I'm getting at is you and I like you, Sai. I admire you, but we're pretty diametrically opposed on how we approach things. I nodded. He could pick up something and be very good at it from the outset. I could focus on something and get very, very good at it given time. He was maturing fastest. He was most physically fit. I was lagging behind to an alarming degree, and I couldn't even fare that well against Jamie in a mock fight anymore. Jamie, of all people. That's not a bad thing, I said, being different. No, it isn't. We thrive in diversity. I think that's one of the Academy mottos. That doesn't mean there aren't issues. So yeah.
Like we've seen Sai contrasting himself specifically.
Yeah.
To Gordon in I think every chapter.
Yeah.
This arc, it feels.
And I think this is confirmation that Gordon does the same thing. like recognizes that Sai has all these strengths that he doesn't have.
But it's also, I think, what I thought was important from this was this idea that Gordon sees it not as like, look at us, we're so different, but also look at us, we're like complementary.
Yeah.
Like, it's like Gordon kind of sees Sai as like his second in command, not just from that quote that you said, but from other
overall,
passages
yeah,
we've seen
absolutely. He
recently.
asks Sai for input and advice regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and it even feels sometimes like Sai is the leader and Gordon is the one implementing the which is probably ideal because, as you said, they're complementing each other and they both recognize there are situations where one has the tool set to solve the situation or solve the problem and the other doesn't.
And so, like, in this chapter, Gordon is very concerned. Like you said at the end of that quote, there are issues, and the issues are that Gordon doesn't understand what's going on with Sai and Genevieve.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, like, they have that sort of relationship where usually, like, Sai is such an agent of chaos. He's like, you know, his mind is going twice as fast as anyone else's, but Gordon understands. And Gordon, you know, speaks the same language in a certain way. And so when he doesn't understand it, he's like, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's get this sorted out, because that's the sort of relationship they have. They're friends and they want to get that sorted out. So I just really think that this relationship between Sai and Gordon, the way it's been explored in this arc, is just really fascinating.
For sure. And I mean, especially, I keep bringing it back to this, but especially against the backdrop of the Lambs not being cohesive necessarily.
Yep. And this being Sai and Gordon not being cohesive. But
yeah, but
they recognize that it's
mattering.
important.
Or not mattering. No, but like
we said the opposite of each other.
No, but I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that, like, the fact that they're not getting each other doesn't matter because they trust each other and they know that, like, they have strengths. Like, it's
but at the same time, they see it as a priority to
understand each other. Yeah, but
even more so than the rest of the Lambs.
Yeah. Like, they're coming at it this idea like, oh, we need to. I trust that you're coming at it at this problem with your, and I trust that you know what's going on and you know what's important. And if you can explain it to me, or you don't even really need to explain it to me, because I recognize that you yet. So I'm struggling to articulate that. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I know what you mean.
One thing I thought was interesting right after this, I didn't put it in the things also, is I just caught it when I was reading things, that Gordon telling him that he doesn't, that Sai is making all these mistakes with Genevieve. And Genevieve answers that, you can't be 100% right with her, I said. I thought for a second, trying to find the words with which to explain. She has no aggression. She doesn't let aggression touch her. If you hit her head on, she doesn't fly back. She just diffuses the impacts, makes it wasted effort. She shows something on the surface, but there's a depth that she's hiding. And I think that's just a really interesting way. I don't know that that's how I would have parsed their conversations. It feels like she has a certain degree of hostility or aggression.
I think that she has a certain degree of
drive, maybe?
Threat.
Okay.
Where it's like, just by who she is and the position she's in and what she's up to, you know she's threatening. But when you interact with her, she's all friendliness and kindliness.
Yeah.
I think that's what he means by that.
Sure.
Because she's never threatened him directly. She's never, like, the only thing is that she's refused to stop Warren when Warren is being aggressive towards him.
That's true.
So, like, it's like you see her and she's like this kind, nice, agreeable woman, but you know in the back of your head that that's not what she is, because she has done these bad things. She has poisoned the water supply. She has, done whatever other crimes she's done in these places that she's been running from. So I think that's what she means, what he means, where he's just like not understanding, where he's struggling so hard to understand her because of that dissonance. You know, Sai says in previous chapters, he wants to cause dissonance because it's easy to manipulate people that way.
Yeah.
But
Whereas,
this is him experiencing the dissonance coming from Genevieve.
yeah, makes sense. Well, and Gordon even says that you're romanticizing her.
I think that Sai is romanticizing her.
Absolutely. I agree. I think there's an element of, if she's still a good person or she's a good person, that means Sai can be too, despite Wyvern.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I don't know. It feels like he keeps looking for ways to read her positively.
Mm-hmm. And I think even when he is trying not to,
He
he
does.
can't help but feel that way.
Yeah. It's like a kinship.
Yeah. It's like, yes, you are my opponent, but
we're actually the same.
Yeah. And so Gordon definitely does have a point here.
For sure.
He is romanticizing her, but also she is very enigmatic from Sai's perspective, especially.
Yeah.
So you can't really blame him. She's like a very romantic character. I think that's all very fascinating.
I agree.
Before we circle back to Genevieve, let's talk about the other lambs.
Sure, we've already kind of talked about Gordon. I don't think there's anything else to add there necessarily.
Yeah. And Mary, just kind of the little look.
Yeah.
Give me your knives, I said. She shot me a look. One that should have been reserved only for the worst class of people, like baby murderers or puppy kickers. I thought that was funny.
It is.
But also, Sai is the worst class of people. He's like a baby murderer or a puppy kicker.
Except he's not at all.
He's worse. Also, poor Mary. She's like in so much pain and just so frustrated.
I feel like she's more frustrated than actually in pain.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm sure she's had a stool explode against her back.
Yeah.
But she seems more like, okay, this is not the time for whatever you're trying to do right now. Let's just move aside. Like, I don't have time for your nonsense.
Yeah. She's not happy, and I really do feel bad for her in this chapter.
For sure.
Can't even blame her because she is in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And even if she wasn't, she's, got a point.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Anyway.
All right. So do you want to move on to our monster corner?
Our monster trio?
Our other characters?
Boys and girls of every age, wouldn't you like to see something strange?
So, Warren,
mm-hmm.
being our main antagonist, really, of this...
he's the physical threat.
This section of the arc.
Yeah.
You pulled out... I think you already talked about this stuff
did.
About his noir look.
Like he's the goon in the noir thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I picture there's this specific image from Tracer Calvin and Hobbes, the Tracer Bullet, is that his name? Yeah. Let me see if I can pull it. I can find it real quick.
Okay.
Oh, come on. Why are you not visible here? I mean, Tracer Bullet is just such a great set of Calvin and Hobbes strips. Have you? I don't know how familiar you are with Calvin and Hobbes.
I've read a few strips, but not gotten super into it.
I can't find the one I'm thinking of, but it's just this looming. Oh, here it is. Come on, why'd you get small again? It's just this looming in the dark figure. I just posted it in our planning channel. And this is just the kind of visual that I get from Warren in this chapter.
Yes, very much so. That's exactly right.
Definitely great podcasting to talk about something that is entirely visual to people who are in an auditory medium, but there's not that much Tracer Bullet. You should be able to find it if you're interested in looking them up. Anyway.
One thing that I thought was kind of interesting with the knives business was he protects his face.
Yeah.
But aside from that, he doesn't even seem to mind the knives. They don't even hurt. It feels like they don't even hurt him at all.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet that knives to the face would not actually hurt him much either, despite it still being like the last bit of him that is original. I feel like it's probably more of a psychological thing. You're going to flinch when someone throws something at your face,
Yeah.
even if it's not necessarily going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And there might even just be like an element of vanity to it too. It's just like, this is all that I have left of who I was. They've just talked about how his family's there and he's not going to go back to his family. Even that was like dangled tantalizingly in front of him.
Yeah. Like you can see why he would want to protect his face like that.
Yeah.
Like, definitely
For
sure. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. Like they're trying to drive him off with knives, and it's like, even if they did hit him, like,
it's not doing
what's
anything.
it gonna do?
Yeah.
There was also this idea that Sai suspects that you could see in the dark.
Because his eyes glow a little bit, was it? Something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, this guy is just unstoppable.
Yep.
What was the word we chose at the beginning of our...
Implacable.
Implacable.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I know they compare it to Sub Rosa, but in a very different way from Sub Rosa.
Yeah, because Sub Rosa was like, you can hurt her easily.
Yeah.
But she comes back.
She keeps coming.
Whereas this guy, you can't even hurt him at all.
Yeah. And in theory, one can reason with him, but it doesn't work at all. Whereas in theory, you cannot reason with Sub Rosa, but they were still able to have an argument with her and like convince her to do things. Like, it's very much a stark, explicit contrast between the two.
Yeah. I mean, even Sai is comparing him to Sub Rosa in this chapter.
Yep.
And to the lambs too. Points out that like their brains, like they plan and strategize, whereas he's brawn. But he's not brainless brawn like Sub Rosa was. He's smart and strong.
Yeah. I feel like it's a bit of a disadvantage for Sai there to be making that comparison or that like that dichotomy between brains and brawn. If he's like actively thinking about that, I think it's to a detriment to himself.
Yeah. And then at the very end of the first chapter, the shout at our backs was ragged and loud. Wendy! Yeah, Kimberly Dauber does a great Wendy shout there.
Oh, yeah?
But it's just like, Wendy keeps saying how much of a gentleman he is and how kind he is. But mostly we've just seen him being like sort of
looming brute.
Yeah. And even in his own chapter, he was just kind of like a dumb student-y sort of person.
Yeah.
And then he was like just angry.
Yeah. So seeing that,
But then like just that one word, and it's just like, no, he actually does care. He does love Wendy and care for her.
For sure.
Yeah.
Why
can't they all be friends?
Yeah, because of the Academy.
Friggin' Academy. Speaking of Wendy, I loved how many just like iconic phrases she has. Is they encounter her again, and she's just like, "You." So great. And then when she says, "Thank you," she said, very prim, "and you're mean, all of you. You're horrible. Excuse me for saying so."
We are very terrible, I admitted.
Yeah, says Sai. I just love that. Just like everything she says is just delightful.
For sure. It's such a different kind of character than we've encountered. It's a very different kind of conflict or adversity for Sai.
Yeah. We were kind of talking before we started recording about what kind of character Wendy is. Because we were like, we really like characters like Wendy, but we couldn't really put a description on.
Sort of the Amelia Bedelia type thing, but it's not quite.
Yeah, it's just like the sort of, like I put in this next point, like she's simple, but she's not stupid. She understands to a certain extent, but she just like doesn't have that sort of depth, but she cares and she tries and she's a good person. But also like she's just, I don't even know how to describe it exactly, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Discussion question. Describe it for us, please.
Tell us what it is about Wendy that is actually so great. Yeah. I think everything else we've talked about already
Yeah, I think so.
with Wendy. So for Genevieve, we've talked a lot about her as well. But one thing that I thought was very interesting was this water-based thing. Actually, we never actually talked about that, was the plan to poison the water supply,
Yep.
which is a very Batman
Mm-hmm.
villain type
For sure.
thing.
Well, the whole thing, I don't even know if poisoning the water supply is like the purpose of her plan, because all of it all of it really feels like one of these big Rube Goldberg machine contraption plans that Sai sets up. But like that she did on a bigger scale, like, oh, the water, and then he's going to meet her near the water, and then he's going to see the snake, and then when they're in the room down in the lab, they're going to be surrounded by water and eels and all that. It just it all
I'm just
feels
gonna
too
throw water imagery at you until
exactly
you get it.
exactly. It just feels like
You think Genevieve is just sitting there being like, how many times do I have to like meet him by an aquarium before he does his part of the plan?
yeah, no, yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
um,
and I don't know yet if that is actually a plan, unless that's another step in another plan to lead Sai somewhere else.
mhm.
Or the Lambs somewhere else. I keep saying Psy, but they're a package deal.
Yeah, and I think that like Sai is her into the lambs. Like the lambs
For
wouldn't
sure.
do anything without Sai
Yeah.
being there to sort of connect them. And we talked about that, the dichotomy and the dissonance that Sai is experiencing, but I also feel like there's a lot of dissonance to the reader with Genevieve. It's very kind of
Mm-hmm.
unclear how much she's genuine and how much
For
she's
sure.
like villainous. Like we've sort of talked about how having read Boyle makes us think of her as much more sympathetic.
Yeah, she is a protagonist in my mind, even if
Uh-huh.
she's not necessarily the protagonist of this story.
Uh-huh.
I
But
guess
that,
everybody's the protagonist of their own story, right?
yeah, like in real life, that's true. And
Yeah.
in well-written fiction, it feels like that's true too. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that certainly is the case here. But I think that makes, that really kind of enhances, this idea that Sai is feeling for us as well. That
Yeah.
she is enigmatic, that she is good and yet possibly bad, what he calls the iron fist and the velvet glove, but possibly not having an iron fist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I still have no idea what Genevieve's perspective on this is, and how straightforward, how much is manipulation. Is it actually none like she thinks, or all of it like Sai thinks? She's such a fascinating character.
For sure.
And yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't think that actually
Well, I
provides any more insight than we already had, because we already
I
would
don't know.
been.
I think there is a little more insight when Sai, Sai thinks, quote, she is putting up a front, one that she buys into at least a little. I think it's easy to lie, or it's easier to lie to people if you believe your own lie.
That's true. That's true.
Like, so I'm not necessarily saying it is a lie, but if it is a lie, it's one that she has convinced herself so that
Hmm.
she can. And I'm sure Wyvern allows for that, helps for that,
Sure. So she's not being manipulative. She's just
or she is, but
mistaken or misled in her own way,
yeah, or
in a
misleading
certain way.
herself, setting herself
Yeah.
to, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't even know, like, we keep saying when we don't know, it's like, oh, I guess we'll find out or we'll see. I don't even know if we'll find out or at all with her. Like, we might come
Mhm.
to the whole end of Twig and still be like, what the hell is going on with Genevieve?
We'll be like, Genevieve, oh yeah, she showed up in one chapter or one arc in the very
That's true. That
beginning.
could also happen. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think, I feel like even if Genevieve doesn't show up after this, her
Mhm.
legacy on Sai is going to,
Absolutely.
will have to, like, much more than Mauer's legacy has so far, and even that's been pretty strong.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he explicitly brings it up, right? Like comparing how he felt interacting with Mauer and how he feels interacting with Genevieve, or like being antagonistic with both or either.
Yep.
All right.
So that kind of brings to a close our discussion. So normally next we would have our discussion question, but our last discussion question was, would you rather have Twig-style body mods or Seek-style body mods? And I suppose we should have anticipated that this would result in some mild spoilers in the discussion question responses.
We did not, and that is
We
on
did
us.
not anticipate, but they're there. So we've decided to move the discussion question discussion to the end, and we'll bring the biofact to here.
So, what is our biofact?
Did you know flesh hands don't have the ability to sense wetness by touch?
I did know that, but I don't know more than that. It's one of those fun facts that you just like,
Yes.
oh, you're
And
just feeling cold. You're not actually feeling wet.
Mm-hmm. And some of our listeners might recognize that as a quote from Wildbow. But I did a little bit of looking. So the ability to sense wetness is called hygrosensation.
Okay.
And there are two ways that this is done. One of them is with actual sensors that can detect skin humidity, which are called hygroreceptors. So this is the ability to sense wetness by touch. Hygroreceptors have only been found in arthropods.
Okay.
So a couple of types of insects, and I believe one species of spider. So it is actually not just humans, but pretty much most animals.
Nothing and nobody can
Nothing
feel
and
wet.
nobody, except for a couple of insects.
Yeah.
However,
so does that mean that Taylor Hebert knows what water actually feels like?
Don't hit me with such deep insights at this time of day. That is an interesting point. Mm-hmm. Yep. So the idea is that for other animals like humans, we still have this hygrosensation, the ability to detect,
to recognize that we are touching water.
And as is usually pointed out, it's mostly related to temperature, right? We perceive cold and we think it's wet, but it's more than just that. It's this paper that I'm looking at here, human skin wetness perception, psychophysical and neurophysiological bases. The idea is that humans not having the ability to directly sense it, collect a bunch of different things all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Temperature, movement, spatial awareness, all these things, and just calculate it in the brain, and that turns it into
wet.
Is it wet or not?
Yeah.
Which I think is super fascinating because it's not just like, it kind of reminds me of some other senses that we have. One that comes to mind is the blind spot in our eyes, where the optic nerve goes through the retina.
Yeah. And
we can't see it because your brain calculates around it. And so you can't even perceive it even if you want to. And so it's that sort of thing. It's not just, oh, it feels cold and therefore we think it's wet. It's like actually just like calculating and reconstructing
what
the ability
wet
to
is.
sense something despite not having the receptor for it. And I think that's just so cool.
It really is.
And it says, remarkably, this strategy seems to be shared by other hygroreceptor lacking animals. However, questions remain on whether these sensory mechanisms are underpinned by specific neuromolecular pathways in humans. Okay, so there is still quite a lot of...
in theory, have something that is telling us, oh, that is wet, even if it's not specific.
Well, it's more like, do we have like
specific
neural pathways dedicated to
that math?
That math, exactly.
Yeah.
So, a lot of research yet to be done on this subject, but I do think it's really fascinating, the ideas, like these ideas of like perception based on like mental subconscious mental calculation.
For sure.
I've listened to a podcast recently about human perception of time passing and
Okay.
the insane amount of like manipulation that goes on in your brain in order to experience time linearly when, like, you know, light is reaching your eyes faster than sound is reaching your ears,
Sure.
and your brain retroactively syncs them up.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so cool. Anyway, that's our bio
it
fact.
is.
I
It
probably
is.
hinted at an even more interesting bio fact at the end there, but
We're never going to talk about that again, so let's
never
move on.
again. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I felt like we had to use that as our
Yeah.
bio fact when I read that in
Sure.
Wildbow's output. So anyway, on to our outro. And by
Oh.
outro, I mean book recommendations.
I don't have any book recommendations. Do you?
I have, because I was on vacation last week, and so I spent the week on the beach drinking pina coladas and catching up on all of the print books that I haven't gotten to because they don't have audiobooks.
What did you read?
So I finally read Yarrow. We've
Mm-hmm.
mentioned it once or twice. I really want to do a bonus episode about it at some point.
I would have to reread it. It's been a short minute since I read it.
really, really enjoyed it a lot.
It was
essentially
very interesting.
It's essentially a vampire novel set in
70s Ottawa?
80s, early 80s
Ottawa?
And it's so weirdly specific with the geography too, which I thought was fun.
That was.
But even not knowing the local geography, it's just a great little vampire novel story, and I thought it was clever, the take they took on it. Kind of reminded me of The Sandman as well, except that, as far as I know, Delint seems to be a pretty decent person.
Yep.
Delint also being one of those names that when you read about him, you feel like he ought to be more of a household name than he is, because Charles Delint is one of the pioneers credited with the creation of the urban fantasy genre. I feel like that would make him more well known. So anyway, I really, really enjoyed it. So
I did too. I remember really liking it when I read it. It's been a minute now, but
yeah. I hope that people check it out, and maybe we'll do a bonus episode on it if we can. And I also read my sister's novel.
Fun.
She has written a couple of novels. They're in like the fairy tale, fantasy, romance, young adult genre, which is not usually my jam, but they're really cute. She put a interesting spin on Snow White, where the evil queen is literally Snow White's reflection in the magic mirror.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was just like a fun spin on the story, and I thought it was really fun. So yeah, both of those are books that I have read recently and enjoyed immensely. If you want to check out the latter one, it's called To Rival a Reflection by Selena DeLuca. If you want to check it out, if that's the sort of book that appeals to you, feel free to check it out.
Found it. I will see if it's available in a digital download form. You ready to move on?
Yes.
All right. So, everybody, thank you for listening. Hope you'll stick along and bear with us as we continue down this trip into Twig. You can read along with us at twigserial.wordpress.com. And if you do, or even if you don't, decide to go with us, please do go to Wildbow's Patreon at www.patreon.com/Wildbow and support him. It's how he can produce all these different stories that he's writing and all these interesting settings that we love.
Yeah. Please leave your answers to our discussion question in our Reddit thread. And you can reach us at totwigpodcast@gmail.com. totwigpodcast on the platform known as Blue Sky. That's right. We decided to do it. We're on Blue Sky. I have literally posted nothing.
Did we ever post anything on what was once Twitter?
Yeah, I posted, like, if you want further updates from us, here's the link to Blue Sky.
Oh, excellent.
Which I assume no one will see because I assume that they
immediately purge any reference to Blue Sky.
Yes.
I would assume so also, but yeah.
I'm pretty sure all the platforms hide references to their competitors all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, if you're on Blue Sky, check us out there. If not, we're also at Gmail, our Reddit thread in r/parahumans, our discussion thread in the Doof Discord server. Kind thanks to them, as always, for letting us squat in their server. Next episode, we'll be covering Stitch in Time 4.11 and 4.12.
Do you want to also do Enemy?
Which,
Or do you want to look at that and we'll talk about it later?
I was thinking 11 and 12 and then save Enemy for a future one.
Okay.
I'll tell you
We'll
what, I will read all three of them, and then I'll tell you whether you're allowed to read Enemy or not.
Sounds
after our
like
next
a plan.
recording.
Okay. Sounds great.
So now we're going to go into spoiler territory and talk about our discussion question.
Spoilers for Twig and also for Seek.
Yes, and I want to reiterate, like I've read through most of these, not super thoroughly, but I'm pretty sure the Seek spoilers are very, very mild. So let's go through them. We got a lot of answers, and I'm super happy.
Yeah, I'm stoked.
Because they're also super in-depth and really thought-provoking answers. So we're gonna read them out in full, which I don't know how long it will take. So let's get
Really
started.
bulk up that runtime. All right. So Sir Kotok said, for the Seek style mods, there are problems. Like, yeah, I want an onboard and that stuff, and Seek mods are cool, but they do need constant upkeep. The company that issued them might go bankrupt, and I would lose them. Not to mention all the problems seen in 1.1b and 1.2w. Twig mods are also just not that good for the average consumer. Side effects and shit. I can't talk much in spoilers though, but at least there are some benefits, and it's better to have them than not, I guess. Plus, there are some very good ones, but I doubt as an average person one can get your hands on them. So, like, if you take long-term maintenance into account for me as an average person, Twig style mods. If you don't, then Seek mods, since onboard basal error ones are just too good to pass up. If you talk about ones that average consumers can't get their hand on, then it's back to spoilers, but some good ones do exist. We haven't yet seen the top of the line Seek mods. Who knows? They might actually be even better. But the real answer is, of course, both. I want both at the same time.
The answer is always both.
Or neither. I don't know. I could see a compelling case being made for neither.
Honestly, I feel like neither is probably the actual best answer here.
Yeah.
Ripper1337, or perhaps Ripper Leet, says, I'll always go with Twig-style body mods. Cyborg-style body modification, or even just cybernetics under your skin like Terminator, is a mild phobia of mine.
How about
And
mushrooms
that's
under
very
your
valid.
skin?
Pardon?
How about mushroom under your skin? Like Mauer.
Yes. I mean, clearly that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hobo Demon also seems to be conflicted. Starts the answers. Genuinely conflicted. Twig-style body mods aren't as subject to the enshittification effect of tech and cannibalism as the Seek-style mods, but the surgeons in questions do have other means by which they can deviate from the standard published procedure and ransomware your endocrine system or whatever, which is, aside, that is not Hobo Demon's answer, we saw in Boyle. The barkeeper was being held sort of hostage ransom by the back alley doctor that had done work on him. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. However, the Twig mods, going back to the answer.
That's more blackmail than ransomware, though.
No, it wasn't. It was ransomware because it's like, oh, you have to keep coming back to me for your maintenance because only I have figured out. I've screwed with your system.
It's close enough, I suppose.
However, going back to the answer, the Twig mods do have a distinct and under-remarked advantage over the Seek mod in the sense that they can't be hacked by rando trolls to get your onboard to show you goatsy.jpg instead of a pop-up augmented reality that's supposed to remind you of what your neighbors' names are. However, the Twig mods do have the disadvantage that when you see someone's pet creature doing the goatsy pose, you'll know that it is real and happening. I'll go with Twig mods. Seems more likely to succeed in my dream mod of prehensile wrist tentacles and fewer iterations, since the neurology and UI has already been bootstrapped by 400 million years of evolution. Though engineering some sort of placenta for gas exchange between the hemoglobin and hemocyanin systems may prove difficult. Why can't octopods run an iron-based oxygen transporter like all sensible tetrapods and peanuts? This is the question that spurs an entire research division at the Academy.
Of course.
So also, does this mean that Helen is hemocyanin?
Is an iron-based oxygen transporter?
No, she's not, because she is an octopus.
Yes. Very important.
Yeah.
So what do octopuses use? Copper?
I believe so. Let me confirm that, but that's what I remember reading at
It's
some point.
It's hemocyanin, right?
Yep. Transport is copper-containing protein. So yes, copper.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have green blood?
Now what you do is you get rid of both hemoglobin and hemocyanin, and build something that's got
Does both?
Yes.
Yeah.
40i2 says, sentient onboards are the best mods overall. Wyvern a close second. Although, a side comment from me, we've talked about this, and Wyvern is not fun. Wyvern a close second, so I want both, please. But the caveat is the onboard must be open source, have no spyware, and give no one else any access. Not sure if it's possible in Seek, though Mechard's dog might suggest yes. But these only focus on the mind. If we're talking full body mods, then I think Twig mods are better. No loss of fidelity, no remote access issues, and probably easier to maintain. But I'm basing this partially on some more advanced stuff from later on, and we only saw mods on the cheap end in Seek. If we ever see top of the line, I might change my mind on this. That's very similar to what Sir Kotak said. Was it Sir Kotak who said that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a general... Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of commonality to these answers.
Mm-hmm. So, there's spoilers ahead for Seek and Twig that there might be bigger, better, scarier, and more desirable modifications of both
Bigger
kinds.
and badder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Sweet Manzana says, as someone who is a little behind in Seek and hasn't read the last third of Twig yet, both body mod types seem pretty horrifying in very similar ways. But the smart onboards take it to a different level, considering they have their own intelligence and can stop your body from moving and makes my eyes worse than the Twig ones. Even if the onboard companions in Seek seem to be helpful to the interests and goals of the protagonist, they still probably somewhat beholden to the company that made them. Feels like getting an onboard would put me under control of its creator, and the body mod in Twigs would of the Crown and the Academy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen that explicitly in Seek, yeah. So.
Mm-hmm. But again, like you pointed out, that Barkeeper and Boyle
True.
does put you under the control of its creator too. But that has only happened that one time, as far as I can recall.
I think so, of characters we've seen, whereas...
Yeah. Aside from, like, the appointments for the whims, but that's more to...
That's maintenance rather than... I mean, I guess it is maintenance for that guy too, but...
Yeah. It certainly has been much more ubiquitous in Seek than in Twig. Spinagon says, Seek body mods, no question. I'd rather an implant than a tumor. Completely valid.
Yeah. Mood. Normal non-Eldritch guy says, while I'm a little behind in Seek, I generally prefer the idea of a hardware, parentheses, cybernetic body, mod if you're doing something more minors in less than 50% of the body or anything with the brain. It feels like the upkeep and maintenance is more predictable. However, if we were going extreme totally overhaul, I'd go with a Twig-style body mod. Mild spoilers, but the best of Twig-style body mods are very impressive. As long as you're not planning on any heavy combat, feel fairly stable. Major body mods in either style end up provoking questions, or if you're still human and I'm essentially tweaking out of my personhood, I'd rather have a comfort of still being flesh and blood. Again, that same gist of answer.
Coblin says, opposite answer to normal non-Eldritch guy. I'd go for hardware for a big thing. I think being machine is I think being machine is nicer than being a war beast. Also has the benefit of being more easily DIY modded, with not so many side effects, and fixed. Big means more maintenance. Small stuff I'd rather bio, though, like gene therapy, or whatever Psy has going on over an onboard Seek.
Megafire says, anyway, I think I'd prefer Seek-style body mods, if only because they're more accessible and less dependent on the graces of a single horribly oppressive institution, as opposed to, many horrible oppressive institutions. And Megafire says, also, I like the aesthetics better.
I have to say, the aesthetics of cybernetics is certainly more, more
I feel like
cool and less horrific.
I feel like that's a choice, though. I feel like Twig-style body mods could be...
They could be, but they never are.
The Academy has chosen that that's not the vibe they're going for.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Last one for you.
Finally, someone named Wildbow says, I'm assuming the Twig body mods would be like the ones Warren or Warren's peer group got. Performance and aesthetic changes, blue eyes with visual clarity, horns, added muscle. They don't seem to come with any upkeep or lasting obligation to the Academy. There's a lot of variety in the aesthetics one could presumably choose. In a way, the benefit is the mods become you. Adaptation is automatic. As for Seek mods, you're really buying a product. There's a lot more packed into it. It takes you further, you can do a lot more, like built-in engines. But the expectation is that you'll get regular upkeep with the company, and leaves you beholden to them for that upkeep, repair, etc. I've got a cochlear implant, basically a cyborg ear. And with so many transhumanist, cyborg-focused readers in my audience, I've had many conversations about how I don't think it's all sunshine and roses. It limits my ability to, say, spontaneously go backpacking across Australia, or because my implant needs power, I can't go camping for a week. I'd choose the twig mods.
Perfect. That's a pretty good cap on all the other answers, because I think it pretty well articulates the advantages and disadvantages of both.
And I think Wildbow has the advantage of having basically a cybernetic implant, that so he can speak from experience on the comparisons between that and what he's written. I think that the twig mods definitely have the majority of the answers.
I definitely feel that I would prefer the twig mods, assuming, again, that we're getting ones that are catered to me, rather than, for example, Mauer's mushroom arm that was constantly giving him pain, was misshapen and the wrong size. But like as Webbo says, the Warren's peer group ones, for example, seem perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I kind of get the feeling like when I kind of went kind of back and forth on this question myself, because like if you look at the state of technology currently right now, like I think that the twig style mods are definitely superior because but like because right, like you talk about the cochlear implant, like that's not all sunshine and roses, but like I don't know about like actual twig style mods, like I don't know, gene therapy or hormone therapy or things like that. I don't know how much how that would compare to that. So that's modern like current technology, and I feel like depending on what the application is, both of them could be pretty shitty, TBH.
Definitely.
And then going into like the in the story, so like comparing Warren's mods of his peers and say Winifred's mods and her peers. Definitely Warren's mods, I think, are better. More.
I feel like those are such different context, though.
Yeah, but I mean, just in the case of like, if I were Warren and I got the kind of mods that Warren got, I wouldn't be overly burdened by them.
Yeah.
If I were Winifred and we're getting Winifred's type mods, I would be very burdened by them, even though they were part of who she is.
But I don't think that's necessarily a fair comparison, because Warren's mods are like they're small. Before he essentially
I did say at the beginning that the spoilers would be mild, and then I personally pushed them a bit further.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, but anyway, go on.
I was just saying that, like, what it would be, a better comparison for Twig and Seek, if you're looking at Warren's mods, would be an eye replacement with a cybernetic eye. It's Winifred's at the far end.
That's true.
Of
That's true.
The extremes, you know.
Yeah.
It's replacing a specific organ.
True. That's true. You're right. You're absolutely right.
It's if you had the choice between what Warren had happened to him but done voluntarily, as in the whole big lumbering body thing, or what Winifred's group family does.
I think in that case, Twig definitely wins, because in Seek we have this continuing theme of, you're being beholden to the company.
Or to not necessarily the company, but like for Winifred, I mean, I'm a little bit behind on Seek. Maybe this has changed, but she's beholden to her family and like these power structures and that are like both keep her safe and but also keep her trapped.
I do, however, think that both types of mods would be pretty much indistinguishable given sufficiently advanced technology, like probably beyond what we see in Twig and Seek. So like current real life technology, Twig wins.
Yeah, no question.
these books level technology, Twig wins again. Super advanced technology, I feel like both would be equivalent. And then I think Seek-Style would win because they're cooler. That's my answer.
Yeah.
That was a great discussion question. You came up with that one. That was fantastic.
I like it.
And
I
we got
really
so many great answers. I love every single one of them.
Me too. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate that. Anything else you want to talk about before we call it a night?
I think the one thing we have left to talk about is our new discussion question, which we didn't write down. Wait, we had our secret discussion question, which was explain to us what it is about Wendy's character archetype that makes her so great. But we also had this idea for a discussion question, which was, what sort of thing would you do? What sort of thing, if you did it, would earn you the look?
From Mary.
Or from someone else. Or maybe it's another example from another book of someone doing something and getting the look. I don't know. Do whichever of those discussion questions you want. Or both, or neither, or what have you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye.
Bye. So go ahead.
I was going to say, definitely hope we don't have this long of a delay again. I know I say that every time, and then...
Well, if you stop being hexed every time we try and record...
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, bad luck doesn't tend to last, so...
Yeah.
Fingers crossed we'll
get there.